Family is something else, ain't it? I remember I was living in Germany at the time, in Frankfurt. My dad was an officer in the Air Force, and we were stationed at Rhein-Main Air Force Base in Frankfurt. And I was in ninth grade, so I was either still 13 or I'd probably just turned 14. And my brother is 2 years younger than I am. He got mad at me. Me and my brother did not have a very good relationship when we were younger. It was very contentious. I felt like he was the family snitch. Even if he was doing something with me, he was snitching. He was telling. So we did not get along very well. He got mad at me. And the thing about my brother is he had, and I'm saying he had the quickest of tempers, just the shortest of tempers, especially when he came to me. He would get mad fast. And it made him even angrier if I act like it didn't bother me. So one day he got mad at me. I don't know, I probably pushed him or something. And he decided, he hauled off and said with his mouth he was gonna kill me. Now, this is not the first time, not his first attempt, didn't bother me at all. However, he went and pulled one of my dad's swords off the wall. So I said, you know what? I'm not gonna deal with this foolishness today. So I went in my room and locked my door. And you ever seen the look in somebody's eyes where it says he's for real? So when he said he was gonna kill me, it's not a euphemism. It's not one of those things that people just say. No, he meant that. And I went in my room, shut the door, and he took that sword and started to hack through my door like the scene from The Shining. It's Johnny. Yeah, he went crazy. But it's family. What you gonna do? Hello, Governor. This is Rakai Steed, Noop from the Ville, and we're back. Sherlock, Season 1, Episode 2, The Blind Banker. We're gonna call this deep dive Familial Bonds. Now, for a quick recap, at the beginning, we're introduced to Su Lin Yao. She is a Chinese pottery expert, and she's at the National Antiquities Museum, and she gives a display. Meanwhile, Sherlock hasn't worked in a while. He hasn't taken a case, and he gets invited to a finance house, a brokerage, by an acquaintance named Sebastian Wilkes that he went to university with. It's apparent from their interaction that Wilkes didn't even particularly like Sherlock. He probably bullied him and talked about him behind his back because they didn't understand Sherlock, which unfortunately most people on the spectrum have to deal with through childhood and even in adulthood. When people don't understand you, it makes it easier for them to talk about you and say things to you in a bullying manner because they simply don't understand or they feel inferior. Now, it appears there was a break-in at the brokerage, and two symbols that didn't mean anything were spray painted on the wall. Sherlock quickly figures out that it is Eddie Van Koon, who's attached to the Hong Kong desk, who didn't come into work, who they were intended for. They go to his flat and find him dead inside. But the problem is his house is completely locked from the inside. So right now it's looking like suicide. So Captain Lestrade doesn't show up, and we're introduced to a new detective, Dimmock. He's been briefed. He knows who Sherlock is, and it's one of those things too where people have a preconceived notion of you before they ever meet you. So he's been told probably the negative things about Sherlock, and not how absolutely brilliant he is, but more so how difficult he is to work with, and that he's a bit of an asshole. Now, when we met Su Lin Yao at the Antiquities Museum after she did her demonstration, she was working late that night. She saw something in the museum that scared her and she disappeared. And it appeared to be some sort of symbols that were painted on the wall of the brokerage. So it appears that these two cases are connected. Then we have a journalist, a Brian Lucas, who didn't report into work. When they went to his house, they found him dead inside the house, and the house was completely locked from the inside as well. Another suicide, but the circumstances look very similar to Edward Van Coon, but there were no symbols here. However, we do find that when Sherlock and John investigate and they go to the library where Brian Lucas had been, on a shelf where he had checked out a book, the same symbols were painted. Now, Dr. Watson's consumed with, they need some money. They haven't been booking jobs and bills are due, and they just need some money. So he takes a job at a local hospital as a fill-in, kind of a temporary doctor that accepts the duties of another doctor. Now, while they're investigating the link between Edward Van Coon and Brian Lucas, they both find that they had been to a restaurant called the Lucky Cat, and also that they had both just returned from China and went to China often. Dr. Watson finds these symbols in the shop, and Holmes figures out that they're numbers. Holmes goes to Su Lin's flat and finds out it's been empty. And while he's inside, an attacker's inside, and a brief fight breaks out between Holmes and the attacker. Holmes then goes to a local graffiti artist to help him figure out not only the symbols, but figure out the paint, since they're using some kind of spray paint. Watson finds some more symbols graffitied on a wall. He takes a picture, and they find out it's a kind of code, but they don't have the key to the code. Holmes figures out that Su Lin didn't just leave, and that she keeps coming back to the museum to take care of her pottery. He surprises her and lets her know that and she lets him know that the code belongs to a smuggling ring from the Black Lotus Tong, a Chinese mafia type family. Organized crime. She tells the story that she was an orphan, her and her brother, and they were taken in by Tong, and she's been working a life of crime forever, but she wanted to get away from it. And she left China and came to London to start over, to get a new life. Her brother went the other way, and he became basically an assassin for the organization. She starts to decode the message, but before she can finish, she is killed, seemingly by her brother. Sherlock and Holmes figure out that these people were killed because while they were smuggling, they stole something that didn't belong to them. Sherlock knows the message is in the form of a book cipher, but it has to be a book that everyone uses. He also figures out that whoever got in there was small, could climb into small spaces, high spaces. It came in through windows and things like that. They had to be extremely strong. He figured out it's probably a gymnast, an acrobat, something like that, stealthy, ninja-like even. There just happens to be a traveling Chinese circus in town for a few days. So Holmes gets tickets to the circus for John and his lady friend, who he also works for at the hospital. That's not inappropriate or called HR at all. But then Sherlock invites himself as a third wheel on a date. Typical Sherlock. While they're snooping around backstage, Holmes is attacked. It basically stops the show. In the ensuing chaos, John and Sarah are both kidnapped. The Tongs and Shan, who is the general, she's pretty much the person running it, even though at the time you don't know that it's a she. Shan is the lady who was kind of the headmaster of the circus. And she thinks, just based on some coincidences, that Watson is Sherlock. And she wants back what was stolen. And if he's not going to tell her, then they'll kill Sarah. This is one hell of a first date. Sherlock cracks the code and finds out that it's the A to Z London Street Atlas, because that's a book that pretty much everyone, especially tourists, have in London. Who knew? It was a jade hairpin that the Edward Van Coon bought for his girlfriend / secretary back at the office. He gave her the little hairpin as a gift. He gave her the hairpin as a gift to show her how much he cared about her. She thought it was just a trinket he brought back from his travels, had no idea that it actually belonged to an empress, and that the jade hairpin, a small hairpin, was worth 19 million pounds, which is like $35 million. In the fight that ensued to get Watson and Sarah back, John and Holmes defeated everyone. However, Shan got away. And at the end of the story, Shan is on the phone with M, we find out, and for Sherlock Holmes fans, you know that M is Moriarty. Did not anticipate the problem that Sherlock would present, and she said, you know, it'll never happen again. And M tells her, you're right, it will never happen again. Next thing we know, we see a red dot on Shan, and as we hear M hang up the phone, Shan is shot and killed. You know how I love my quotes. So this quote is from Richard Bach. He says, the bond that links your true family is not one of blood, but of respect and joy in each other's life. The love of family is life's greatest blessing. In looking at this particular episode of Sherlock, it could have been easy to tie into the code breaking and the need for the book to decipher the code. And there are a lot of things that I could have went with, but I went with the familial bond. Not only have we seen the strained familial bond between Sherlock and Mycroft, but this one between Su Lin Yao and her brother, who were both orphaned as young children and forced to join the Tongs, and then still ultimately ended up going in two different directions. One wanting peace and a way out, and the other one, you know, going all in, even to the point where their familial bond was so strained and so non-existent that Su Lin Yao's brother was the one who killed her. You know, in the story I told in the beginning where my brother tried to kill me and yelled several times through the door, where I said to him, you know, I'm the only brother you have. If you kill me, you won't have a brother anymore. And then he yelled back in response, I'm good with that. I want to be his only child anyway. You know, the thing is, me and my brother have a pretty strong relationship now. And it took a long time for us to get there. And the first thing was me leaving home and he realizing, as well as myself, that what we had was solid. And even though we didn't get along at the time, when it came, at least from my end, I recognized that that was my little brother and it was my job to protect him. In our household, I was a rabble-rouser, I was a shit starter, and my brother was very much more so the go-along type. This whatever did not cause any strife to his life or that got him, you know, that kept him out of trouble, he was for it, where I didn't give a shit. You know, just one of those situations where I was too smart for my own damn good. But it is hard to be estranged from family, you know, being that me and my brother were raised as military brats and lived all over the world, we, outside of each other and my mom, we didn't have the strong sense of family that when we finally ended up in Kentucky, after my parents' divorce, it was difficult for us because now we are the newcomers and we're trying to break into this family, even though by blood we're family. But these are people who have been around each other all their lives. They knew each other's secrets, habits, wants, desires, whatever. They had experiences that they had shared as children with their aunts, uncles, cousins, grandmother, stuff that we didn't have. So it is difficult sometimes to be estranged from family. You know, and in our case, family is blood, but a lot of times family is found. And there are people that you're family. And I did a previous deep dive on Doctor Who where I talked about family. You will see me probably come back to family pretty often because family is important to me. Family is everything. And you will hear me talk about my kids ad nauseum because they are my family and they're the most important things in the world to me. So real quickly, there are 7 keys to help you break through with an estranged family member, whether that's found or blood relations. Number 1, leave the past in the past. Focus on the present and your future, and hopefully it'll be your future together. Let bygones be bygones, or whatever it is, water under the bridge. You cannot go back and fix what happened in the past. I understand wanting to understand what happened and talk about your grievances, but the longer you dwell on it, the more likely it is that that conversation is going to go left. Number 2, be easy. Start slowly. However you start the conversation, go in easy. Don't go in hot, because chances are it's going to go left fast. Number 3, be honest, but don't be hurtful. Take into account other people's feelings. They may not feel the same way you feel. You know, it's okay for you to air your grievances and to get past a rough patch and have an uncomfortable conversation, but that doesn't, you don't have to come in guns blazing. Number 4, address the differences honestly. Don't look at it the way that you wish it would have went down. Don't look at it the way that you wanted them to respond. Talk about your grievance from your side and then do them a favor and just hear them out. Number 5, and this one could be a hard one for some people. Accept your brother or your sister as they are now. Don't bring up who they were. Don't bring up who you want them to be. Try to find a way to find out who they are now and accept them for that. That's the only way that you can build something towards the future, is if you know who they are and accept them. And of course that does go vice versa. Number 6, withhold judgment in explaining your feelings. It is okay to explain your feelings, but that should not come with judgment. Talk about your feelings. Listen to their feelings, but don't pass judgment. Try to find a place of understanding. And number 7, maybe the hardest one. Number 7, and maybe the hardest one for a lot of people, check your ego. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. I did want to say that, but I don't know why I did. It sounded cringe as soon as it came off my tongue. Anyway, if you want to get to some real understanding, you want to get to a real place of healing, you have got to check your ego. And don't go out of your way to tell them to check their ego. As a matter of fact, one of the things that you can do is kind of set some ground rules before you have this uncomfortable conversation. Let them know, don't tell them what they need to do. Let them know what you are going to do. That way that allows them to follow suit. Tell them you are going to check your ego. You are going to listen twice as much as you talk. You are going to listen twice as much as you talk. You are going to not pass judgment and do your best to try to understand their feelings and where they are now and who they are now, and see if you can build toward a positive future together. I had a misunderstanding with my cousin where he was upset with me over something allegedly my brother said. And he held a grudge until I cornered him and made him have an uncomfortable conversation. And I was like, that didn't happen, my boy. And he had a hard time letting go. And when reason soaked in, and unfortunately my cousin spent a lot of time drinking and smoking. And even though he had a great job, it was almost like Monday through Friday afternoon, great guy, on top of his stuff. Friday evening until Sunday evening, early Monday morning, drunk. And usually people are running away from problems that they don't want to deal with. And for him, it was some problems, the uncomfortable conversation that he was not willing to have in his marriage. And he reverted to being a high school student on the weekends. And he let this thing between us fester. And even when we hashed it out and got it straight, our relationship never rebounded. And he ultimately passed, and we were still on very rocky ground. I mean, we were cool, but we weren't cool. Do your best to repair the relationships that mean something to you. And even if they don't, find a place of healing, find a place where you can say, you know what, I've done what I can to repair this relationship. Tomorrow's not promised to any of us. And the one thing that you don't want to have are regrets. This is Rakai Steed, Noob from the Ville. Make sure that you like, comment. Do you understand what I'm saying? Does this make any sense? Are there people in your life that you have lost touch with for one reason or another, and maybe you just didn't know how to fix it? Share this video as much as possible. And if you have not subscribed, please subscribe. We're really trying to push forward. We got to 1,000 subscribers, and that was amazing. But now we're trying to push forward into a whole new area. And it takes you. I have a lot of great videos for you to watch, and every now and again I might say something that makes some sense. So go and watch the videos that are at the end of this that I suggest, and maybe some of the other videos too. It's gotta be about this. But it's gotta be about this too.